Why do I love the PCA? I think most people answer that question first biblically. They say, we love the PCA because they teach the Bible. So much of our culture experiences the erosion now of not having a standard for truth. And when people come into our churches, they say, they preach and teach the Bible. It is anchored in the Word what the people here believe. And once they're in our churches for a while, people recognize that we systematize and guard what the Scriptures teach by our confessional standards. So people grow to love the confession. And then when they recognize that confession is talking about the great victory of God through the blood of Jesus Christ that is going to claim people eternally, we want to tell the world about that. We are missionally minded as well. When I think about what I love about the PCA, I love that it is biblical, I love that it is confessional, I love that it is missional. And I think that's why most people are in our churches. But you'd have to say that the reason that we love those things is in some ways a response to the fact that we are coming out of churches or contexts where those truths were not loved. And we are still reacting to denominations that we were once a part of that would not affirm those essential truths of the faith. That means we retain deep in our DNA an anti-denominational viewpoint. So even though we're a denomination, we sometimes struggle to be a church acting corporately, even though we call ourselves Presbyterian. And one of the great evidences of that, of course, is that less than half of the churches of the PCA support the work of the PCA. Any committee or agency that is collectively part of the PCA, most churches don't support a single one. So we call ourselves Presbyterian and believe in what we're doing corporately, but we tend to operate individualistically. Well, ultimately there are consequences to that. And what we're beginning to discern is how difficult it is for us to do ministry together, maybe even be a future denomination if we're not able to pull together. So what's before presbyteries at this time is a constitutional amendment that says we would ask churches to give 1/3 of 1%, 1/3 of 1% of their annual giving to the support of the administrative committee, and that ministers and elders who would be voting at the General Assembly would also have a fee that would be assessed as part of their participation. Now, there will be people who are very concerned about that, and we all understand the reasons, because we have been such a grassroots denomination, kind of giving everybody total license to do as they choose. The difficulty is, now we say to the AC, you must provide us services. That's the administrative committee. You must provide us services. You must provide the organization for our courts, the communication between our agencies, the corporate structures that allow us to operate within this country. You have to do all these things for us, but we won't support you. Well, that's just a matter of integrity, of saying, if you're requiring work for someone, hopefully you'll compensate them. And we are saying to people, if you say you won't compensate in any way, you're not being kicked out of the PCA, but you wouldn't have a vote at the General Assembly. If you're not going to support what we do, why should you be directing what we do? Now, that's just a matter of integrity, and we recognize there are different philosophical reasons that people will bring, but I think it, at least for me, boils down to that basic understanding. We want to do mission together, and we're saying to everybody, if it comes to other mission agencies, if it comes to other educational agencies, we're not requiring you to support those, because if you don't agree with those services and you're not using them, you're not being required to support them. You're being asked to support them, but you're not being required to. But the administrative committee, you're requiring them to do your work. We should, as a matter of integrity, support the work of the administrative committee. Now, there are some people who say it's not constitutional, but our constitutional business committee, which, by the way, has some of the fathers of the church on it who actually wrote the Constitution, has twice ruled that these constitutional amendments are constitutional. That's their advice. And there are those who say, but this will somehow jeopardize our legal status. But those whose business it is to look into the legal status of these amendments have examined them, some of the top attorneys in the country, and they've said this does not jeopardize our legal status. I think what it boils down to is, if you want to operate missionally and then with a sense of integrity, There are those who will say, why in the world would churches and pastors actually vote that they would be having to give a fee to the administrative committee? I mean, what reason in the world would people actually vote to give away some of their own money? I haven't a clue why anyone would do that, unless they are inspired by the mission of our church operating together and have a sense of integrity, that if you're going to require somebody to serve you, you would support what they do. That's what we hope to do, to actually work together as a church to be biblical and confessional and missional, and to protect those principles by supporting the organizing efforts of the administrative committee.